Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. You can hear Bugsy. She's in a bad mood today. I've got to be honest, guys, I'm in a really bad mood as well. Still don't feel particularly great after the last couple of days, but more than that, having to sort of troll through some of the content that's available online, following the City thing, following Angie's comments, the divisiveness in this fan base, you're to blame, it's your fault, all this usual crap that doesn't help anyone. And I never participate in it, I don't. But maybe it's because I'm in a bad mood today, or maybe it's because I've got to call out some of the waffle that I've heard, because on some content pieces last night, I heard some people within the same paragraph contradict themselves like 4 times with the opinions that just weren't even, and no one challenged them. It's madness. You know, I've got some transfer news, views and clues for you as well, and I also want to talk and remind you about a show we did yesterday. So look, I put a very impromptu live stream. It was supposed to be just me and Johnny, and then I put the link out to a couple of people at the same time. I didn't realise, or maybe in the back of my mind I think I did, but I didn't cross my mind at the time, that these two don't like each other particularly. There's a bit of history between them, and they both arrived at the same time, and then all hell broke loose. I want to say publicly, I apologise to all 3 of them, really, for putting them in an awkward position that they weren't aware of. Also to the audience for, not being able to control the situation as well as I should have done as a host. I shouldn't have even put it in, but like I say, just a complete brain fart from me. But either way, I still think it was a great show. I still think we got loads of good insights and good different takes. The reason I brought Paul on was because he is someone that wants and sees the positive and wants to defend Ange, and Johnny, is more critical of Ange, and Sava, is generally speaking, Sava acknowledges both sides but also sees the problems. Anyway, long story short, brilliant show. Apologies to the guys for making it awkward. Please go and check it out if you haven't already. Transfer news, views and clues today. I'll get through them pretty quickly. Outgoings. First one is Radu Dragusin. Apparently Napoli might be willing to pay Tottenham more than what Tottenham paid to get him to us. And apparently he might be willing to leave if the situation doesn't change. Although how the situation can possibly change between now and the transfer window is difficult to know when we've only got 1 game left tomorrow on Sunday against Sheffield United. I'd be very surprised if it happened. His agent hasn't said anything new, but look, if Tottenham were to be able to get more money than you paid, and Ange Postecoglou hasn't played him for a reason, and speculatively I'm saying if that reason is that actually on the training ground he hasn't really seen enough to be confident in him, then, we'll see what happens. I hope it doesn't happen, but it might happen. The next transfer outgoing story is pretty terrifying if it's true, and that is one of the De Boer brothers, I think it might be Frank De Boer, has said that Manchester City have targeted Micky Van De Ven as their next centre-back, and that they're willing to break the bank for him. And of course Manchester City have got, despite all of the charges hanging over their head, the sort of Damocles is very much in play with Manchester City. If they get away with their alleged infractions, then, financially they've got all the money in the world and they've got all the wiggle room in the FFP in the world. And so it wouldn't be beyond them to be able to bid an obscene amount of money for Micky Van De Ven. The question I'd ask you is, first of all, do you think it would even be possible? Would Micky Van De Ven leave if a monster bid came in? How big would that bid have to be for Daniel Levy to say, okay, that's too big to ignore? I know he's only 22, but he is the most exciting centre-back in world football. He's brilliant to watch. Obviously, he can get forward at left-back as well, score goals. The guy's got no ends of talent, an absolute machine. And I wouldn't sell the guy for anything less than, and I mean this, if Manchester City wrote a £150 million cheque, I would probably say no. I know that's crazy, but I just don't think Micky Van De Ven's grow on trees. And I don't think that Tottenham have got a good enough record of spending the money that we get from selling our best players. He's just come, he's on a long contract. Let's build the team around him. We're trying to do something here with Ange Postecoglou. Let me know your thoughts though. Is there a number? What is the number? There's always a number. There's always a price, right? At some point there's a price. So what is it for you? Let me move on to, I think they're the outgoings. I think they are. In terms of incomings, three stories, I think it was. Yeah, one is, I've forgotten his name now. Haven't heard of him before. Did the research on Y-Scout tool. Is a fullback, plays for Fenerbahce and the Turkey team. I think it's like, I'll put the name down, but I think it might be like Akioglu or something like that. I hadn't heard of him. Like I say, did some work on him, and I think it looks like an interesting player. Very good in the tackle, a wonderful left-footed cross on him. Can play left back, right back, or DMC. Scores a couple of goals. Looks interesting. I don't watch the Turkish football, and for what it's worth, I'm not sure where this story originated. The story I was reading it from was in, I think, Football Insider, but I think they quoted maybe a Turkish press. And you know how we feel about the Turkish press on this channel. Every single time I read one of them and they say Tottenham are signing the goalkeeper who's now at Manchester United. They said that Tottenham have signed him. So I said, it's a here we go. And it wasn't. I was in the mud. Then they said that Tottenham had signed was it Reece Nelson? The guy from Galatasaray? And I said, here we go. And it wasn't. So I was in the mud again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I am not going to say there's any truth to this, but for what it's worth, the article also says that Arsenal and Villa and Wolves and quite a few Premier League teams are interested in this guy. So, as I say, I don't know too much about him. I can't even remember his name, but looks decent, but I'm not going to spend any more time on it until it heats up. And if so, I'll come back to you with more detail. The next story off the block is Conor Gallagher. This story won't go away. And the story is that Chelsea are under even more pressure than before to potentially have to sell Conor Gallagher, even maybe at a reduced fee, because their hotels, that story about the selling the hotels for £70 million from the company Chelsea to a third-party holding company that then leased the hotels back so that the revenue from the hotel could come onto the books, as could the £70 million. A brilliantly guided piece of accounting work from Clear Lake Capital and the guys at Chelsea in order to circumvent FFP last year. Well, that still hasn't been written off by the by the Premier League yet. It hasn't been approved. And if it continues to not be approved by the end of the year, then there'll be £70 million further in the debt, further in the hole relative to the line they have to not be over. And they've only got until June the 30th to get that thing approved. And it's not being approved because people at the Premier League are thinking that it's a suspicious transaction that shouldn't fall under the infrastructure column, which is fascinating. Now, on the one hand, here's the kind of rub here. On the one hand, you hope that it's rejected so that Chelsea are in trouble. On the other hand, Daniel Levy has just spending a fortune building hotels on the Tottenham Hotspur campus with the intentions of essentially doing the same thing as what Chelsea have done, which is use hotel revenue and put it into the club. So if it's deemed that these hotels at some point in the future by the Premier League are not going to count as revenue, or at least the sale of it will not count as revenue from a FFP perspective, then is Daniel Levy investing money into a hotel where the revenues will count towards the club, but if there was ever an eventual sale, it wouldn't go towards the valuation of the football club? I know that stuff is boring to some people, but to me it's exciting, interesting, and it always has ramifications. You always learn lessons from what's going on outside of Tottenham. And that, again, for me, is why I always say to people who hate Daniel Levy, who think that Daniel Levy is the root of all problems at Tottenham Hotspur, the reason why we haven't won any trophies, I say zoom out a little bit, spend a little bit of your time analysing what's happening at other football clubs, and you might have a more balanced perspective of why it's more difficult to compete than just because we didn't sign the likes of Jack Grealish, or we signed the wrong Fernandes, or 500 days without a transfer, and all the usual arguments. Sometimes there's things that are very much more important in the grand scheme of things to understand. And in this case, Chelsea with the hotels. We'll see what happens. But in any event, Conor Gallagher it looks like he is how do I say this? When there's this much noise about a transfer, Ange must really rate this guy for his system. Now for me, look, you know how I feel about him. I think he can do good bits. I think he's a good player, a workhorse and stuff. However, I think he does a lot of sideways passing, runs around a hell of a lot, screaming for the ball, finally gets it, and then plays it sideways. And if Ange has a habit of screaming and shouting at players like Romero and Sarr and everybody else, forwards, pass it forwards, then I feel like if we sign Conor Gallagher, he might need to invest in some ear muffs or ear plugs or whatever you call them, because Conor Gallagher, his sideways passing ratios are up there with the very best or worst, depending how you think of it, in the Premier League. Good player, but listen, as I've said a few times now, if we're going to get to the point in the future where you have £100 million world-class players, then you've got to get to the point where you don't need 8 new signings every year. And the way you get to a point where you don't need 8 new signings every year is by sticking with the same manager for more than 5 minutes. And so if Ange wants Conor, then for me to be consistent, it doesn't matter what I want. It doesn't matter what I think about the player. If Ange thinks he's the right fit, then I'll be on board it. That's the other story. Conor Gallagher, he looks like it's going to happen, and it might come in very, very soon, like the second the window opens. It might even be organised already, for all we know. Ange and that lot have said that that the work is all already in place. The other story, which is a never-ending repetitive cycle, and is a player that I really do like, is Santiago Gimenez, and that is in the news today saying that Tottenham have essentially beaten West Ham and other Premier League clubs to the jump for Santiago Gimenez. It's not a deal done, it's not a here we go, but it is looking very much likely that Tottenham are the front runners for the £40 million player. You know I've been talking about this guy for nearly 2 years. The first time I saw him, before he even was linked with Tottenham, ages ago, 23 months ago I think it was, and I saw him play in a Dutch Cup game that just happened to be on Bing Sport, the thing that I use. I popped in, and within 5 minutes I saw this guy just do things that reminded me immediately of Harry Kane, and I was like, who is this guy? He comes deep, he can dribble through tackles using his body shape, he understands how to move his body to protect the ball. He understands how to see someone making a run and then kind of whip it into the right pace at the right time. He's got, for me, everything that I think we are looking for in our kind of price range, in our affordability level, for someone that we can build a team around for the next 5 years. Now, of course, there is the opposite side of the story, and that is that despite a brilliant last season, which is when I watched him the most, and a brilliant start to this season, the second half of the season he's fallen off. I don't know why. Some people were saying it's because he's got a slight injury and he hasn't quite kind of worked it out yet. I don't know. Maybe his mind's distracted. Maybe he knows he's leaving. Who knows? But the version of him that I've seen 75% of the time is a version that I would love to see at Tottenham. Still got to figure out, though, whether the jump from the Dutch League to the Premier League is the right one. But if Ange wants him, again, you get on board it. And we're building a young team, a hungry team, and hopefully a team that has the mentality. Anyway, guys, that's it. Check out the stream with Johnny and Sava and Hotspur Hippie. Let me know your thoughts. The comment section, by the way, was crazy. I've never seen like 400. I've never seen 400 comments or whatever it was, and in every single comment, somebody else was getting the stick. Some people loved Johnny's takes, some people didn't. Some people loved Paul's takes, some people didn't. Some people loved the takes of Sava, some people didn't. The only person who was universally criticised was me for not doing a good enough job at controlling the mayhem. And like I say, I had a really bad performance from me, and I apologise. I'll do better. I'm always trying to learn. Love you guys. Like, subscribe and comment. See you later.